Hello everybody, I'm Chris Callahan, also known as Mr. C, and this video will be about pawn breakthroughs. So something we talked about in another video was the idea of a passed pawn. A passed pawn is a pawn that is running to the other side of the board and no other pawn can stop it. Maybe some other piece can stop it, but it can't be stopped by a pawn from the other side. So for example, these two pawns right here are not passed pawns. They cannot get past each other, right? They're going to be stuck. But these two are passed pawns. Nothing can stop this white pawn, and nothing can stop that black pawn. Passed pawns are very important because when you get a pawn to the other side of the board, of course, it becomes a queen, and the passed pawns are the most likely to become queens. So much thought and energy is devoted to how to make passed pawns. The most common way to make them is probably with what are called pawn majorities. Take a look at the right side of this board, also known as the king side, and notice that white has a pawn majority. And all that means is that white has more pawns on that side of the board. Now, I'm not going to play it out, but basically this is important because if I start pushing my pawns, because I have more of them, as long as I don't do anything silly and give a pawn away, I'm eventually going to have a passed pawn. Because I have more pawns, one of them is going to sneak through. Over here on the queen side, black has the majority, 2 versus 1, and black is likely to have a passed pawn over there. But what if you don't have a majority? What if you have exactly the same number of pawns? In that case, you really shouldn't be able to force a passed pawn to appear. But surprisingly, once in a while, there is this sneaky little magic trick that you can do to make a passed pawn even though you don't have a majority. You get a passed pawn that you don't really deserve. You just pull the rabbit out of the hat and there's the passed pawn. So in the position you're looking at, it's 2 versus 2. There are 2 white pawns and 2 black pawns. But if you're playing white, there is a way to sneak one of the pawns through. Let's make it an exercise. White to play and sneak one of the pawns through. I'll give you a moment to think. Pause your videos if you like. Well, the answer is pawn to b6, which maybe your brain was not letting you consider because it gives a pawn away. But, you know, the question I posed to you was not to hang on to all your pawns. It was to sneak a pawn through. So black only has a couple moves. Black can take, or black can move the pawn forward. But whatever happens, this white pawn is running through. Here's another example, and we'll do it as an exercise again. White to move and sneak a pawn through. Pause your videos if you like. I'll give you a moment to think. Well, this one, after one move, becomes very similar to the previous example. The answer is pawn to a5. And white is threatening to play pawn to a6, which would very quickly make a passed pawn. Black could take, but we would take back. So the only way to stop all that from happening is to take this pawn. And now maybe you'll recognize this position. We play pawn to b6, and away we go. Last example, and I'm going to be honest, this one is pretty hard. You can do it the standard way, where I'll give you a moment to think and you pause the video, or if you want, you could even set it up on a board and sort of go through it a few times and see what you can figure out. In any case, white to play, sneak a pawn through. I'll give you a moment to think. Pause your videos if you like. Well, the answer is pawn to b6, but the hard moves to find come later. So no credit for pawn b6 just yet. There are 2 ways that black can take this pawn. The pawn is threatening to go through by taking that way, so you do have to take it. Let's say they take with the c pawn. Now, if we take back, we're going to be very much stuck. So we need to sacrifice. And the correct answer here is pawn to a6. Now white is threatening to take on b7 and sneak through that way. And the absolutely only way black can stop that is to take. And then off goes the c pawn. You know, it's easy to get into the habit of seeing that you don't have a majority and thinking that there's nothing to do over there. There's nothing happening. But I hope this video has taught you to keep your little antennas up and ready to go for any little opportunity to sneak a pawn through. Because if you can, it might be worth it. Passed pawns are that strong. Anyway, that's about all I got to say on the subject. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you later. Goodbye.